Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
R.A. Robert is his name, and he wrote a very interesting book. It's called Short Stories. And if you will recall, it was our November Publisher's Choice book, and we got him back again. And I was telling Robert that I was, when you read a book with a lot of short stories, you choose them. Some are a little different. And last time I know I was very excited with the one that I think we talked about the contest. I love that.
Yes.
But this time, the one that I really got into was Amphitheater Lake Trail. So welcome to our show again, Robert.
Well, thank you.
That was quite an experience that you went through. Why don't you share what that Amphitheater Lake Trail was all about?
Well, Amphitheater Lake Trail is in the Grand Tetons. So I just decided to hike that trail while I was out west. I was out west alone because everybody in the family was occupied with their own things. And for me to get out there, I had to do it alone. So I camped, and that was one of the hikes that I did, the Amphitheater Trail. It was a really big physical effort, and hiked up the trail and wasn't satisfied with just getting to Amphitheater Lake. I could look up and see, the peaks ahead of me, and there was sort of a trail going up. I was alone, so I had to make a decision. Should I continue alone or not? And I decided I would. I hiked up what is a boulder trail. It's just a place where rocks keep falling down because of gravity and wear and tear on the mountain. And so I hiked around all these boulders. I found a way to walk out on sort of a cliff or a shelf, and I was trying to figure out how to get to the top of this peak.
How
off
high?
The trail.
It sounded like it's pretty high.
Oh, it got somewhere probably around 12,000 feet, yeah.
And you were not out of breath?
I was. I've been to other peaks that got over 14,000, and for me it was walk 3 or 4 steps and then catch your breath and walk some more and catch your breath. But this was 12,000, so it was still pretty tough.
But I
was in good condition
But
at the time.
You had to carry a backpack because you were talking about breakfast. I mean, a lot of things.
I had a day pack. So I parked the car. Most of my gear stayed in the car. I wasn't backpacking. I was day hiking, which if I had carried a backpack that high, it would have been a lot tougher.
Weren't you afraid of getting lost?
No.
Because there's an actual trail?
No. There's a trail, plus you can see pretty much where you're going. I mean, you're above the tree line at that way. You're way above the tree line at that point, so you can see where you came from. It was an adventure, and the way I word the story, I'm actually sitting back at my desk at work, and the computers are down. I'm waiting for them to come back up, so I'm daydreaming about this particular hike and thinking what could have happened if I had made some different decisions. I ended up playing it safe. I backed out of there without pushing it too hard. But I found stuff that people had lost that you wouldn't expect. And I forgot what they were. I think one was I found a watch. It was things that people wouldn't just drop unless something terrible happened to them. And like 3 days before, a couple of people died from exposure. They got caught in a snowstorm there.
Yeah,
so it was. I look back at that and think, well,
I
probably
really
wouldn't do it. Yeah, I probably wouldn't do it today.
Right. Right. I like your last paragraph says, back at my dull gray desk, I realized that I enjoyed and continue to enjoy the memory of that small adventure and the many others. those were the times when I felt the most alive. When the rut tires and bores me, I just click on my mental slides and movies were.
That's what those memories are good for. You can think back. And I've done a lot of stuff like that.
Well, tell me about the animals you saw. I know that you talked a little bit about them. What kind of animals did you see on these climbs?
I saw squirrels and lots of birds. You know, and you look at them, and they live with that challenge every day. Some of the birds flying that high, and I could imagine what it would be like flying with them. You know, way up in the. If you look, at one point I looked over like a little notch in the rocks, and it's nothing but a sheer cliff. And these birds are circling overhead. And I imagine being one of them, flying around with them. Just so graceful and so free.
Sounds like you have a great imagination. That's what it takes to write a book like this. And I do understand that. So are you able to, at any point, like even the experience of driving either in a rainstorm or driving where there's a lot of fog, are you able to sit down and just start writing and things come?
They do. And one of the things I look forward to is when my imagination just throws something out at me as I'm writing. I can't plan ahead for everything that I end up writing. The stuff just surprises me. It's like coming around a corner and being confronted with something different. I don't know quite how to express it, but if you don't get that, if it doesn't happen, if the surprises in your mind don't occur, then I consider that writer's block. You know, I have to write something that I want to read or that surprises me. And so while I'm writing, when the surprises occur, I put them down, and that makes it interesting to me. Well, and I hope it makes it interesting to the people that read.
It does. Well, your short stories are delightful, and some are a little bit more interesting, you know, in some ways than others, because remembering, as I told you about the contest, I mean, you have a lot of morality in some of your short stories. Mm-hmm. I see that. And that's another thing that you can get out in a different way rather than, it's hard to just tell somebody something, but if they can read it, they get it, don't they?
Right. If you can see the picture and understand the reason for the morality. Now, I don't picture myself as the most moral person in the world, but apparently I have some things to say that make sense, some lessons learned.
The name of this book is Short Stories by R.A. Albert, and you can buy this, and I'm going to tell you can actually get it on Kindle, but you can buy this by going to Amazon.com, and just put in Short Stories by R.A. Albert, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so in going over this again, I want you to ask you about the taxi driver. You know, there's a big thing now with these Ubers and all this stuff, and I was thinking about that. Was that all true?
No. That's not true. That's fiction. Most of the short stories are fiction. What I did like was I decided to have a conversation, a person who was alone and having a conversation. So I invented the thing of a dummy, a ventriloquist dummy. So he could use, and in fact, I think it's in the taxi where he uses the dummy to say some things to a girl that he met that he probably would be self-conscious enough not to say them if he was just speaking to her directly. But he had his dummy talking for him. And that to me was interesting to write about, just to think about the dynamics of this conversation between the dummy and his potential girlfriend.
I'll tell you something. When I read that, I thought about that. There was a family I knew, and they had a son who was having some mental issues. And the way that the psychiatrist worked with him was he had some sort of it wasn't like an animal or something, a stuffed animal.
Okay.
And he could talk through the stuffed animal and talk about the things he was, as though it were a person. And I thought of that because it wasn't a ventriloquist, but it was somebody to get out all his feelings and emotions.
Right. And I know myself, if you like dress up in a costume, you're not yourself. You're the character in this costume. You operate differently. You are less subconscious because it's not really you. You're playing a part, and you can say things that you would ordinarily be a little self-conscious about talking about. So that's how that works. And a stuffed animal could, and the ventriloquist dummy was that kind of a thing. I just enjoyed writing that.
Yeah. Now, you said, I think when I talked to you before that you're writing another one, or we talked about that?
I have started. What I'm finding is I'm writing short stories, which is something we talked about. I'm writing more. And when I look back at them after I'm done, they all seem to be the beginning of maybe a novel. And I can't, it's just the short stories a lot of times don't have the closure that I'd like to see. So I actually took your advice. I'm working on the second chapter of the contest.
Oh yeah, the contest was, why did you tell people about that?
Well, there's a fellow he was injured in the war, protecting his country, and he's handicapped. What he used to do, he can't do anymore because of his handicap. So he decides he can't live on Social Security because inflation, and this is something that's going on today, inflation is taking away the value of his Social Security income. So he enters a contest. If he wins the contest, he makes a fair amount of money, and his intention is to use that money to go to school and learn to be a computer programmer, which is what I did in a past life. So he is interviewed to find out if he qualifies to enter the contest. The judges like him. They find out that he was decorated in the war, and they're appalled at the fact that after defending his country, he can't live effectively. So they ask him if he'd like to work for them. And so he gets a job, and he's going to be their technology person, but he enters the contest anyhow to keep an eye on what's going on and potentially help them improve the contest in the future. And that's where I left it, which, as you said, was just like the opening.
No, it is, and I think we all felt quite a bit about him. At least I did.
Yeah.
And so, if you build a character that people want to know what happens, then okay, now what, right?
Well, I'm working on the second chapter for that.
What was his name again? Jake. That's really, well, this other book I was reviewing, see, is Zach. It's, these little words that like that, Zach, Jake. Well, I hope you are, because I was really, really interested in that, the contest. And now he's going to have a better life.
Maybe.
And he's a veteran,
Maybe. We don't know what's going to happen to him yet.
Oh, I see. You're going to give us some twists and turns.
Don't write it for me.
Okay, that's right. I'll stop. It's yours. But what I said to you, though, really was, I find, because we're all so busy, that a book that has short stories, I can get into one, read it, and I'm finished, put the book down, go do something, then come back again. Sometimes novels, unless it's 50 Shades of Grey or something, it's a little bit, it's more difficult because I have a lot of novels that people send me to review. And,
I'm sure.
And I just, I probably bypass them.
Yeah. A lot of people have told me the same thing. And what I find is interesting is, everybody has a different favorite in there.
Oh, do they? So tell me about some of the other favorites.
Which is, well, a lot of people like the amphitheater.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's very exciting for those of us that don't know how to climb and wouldn't want to do that. So we did it.
Right. So you can, and, I do that too. I love Stephen King's novels because you get some really weird stuff. But a lot of people like the LRU room.
Yeah.
And most of the ones that really like it are people that have seen my garage. With 2 kayaks and and all the other stuff that we have. That's where that idea came from.
I also told you another one, and I think I mentioned it in the review, the Butterfly Kiss. Oh, I love that. Let me see. That's pretty short.
I think my mother really liked that one.
We have 10 minutes. How do you feel about reading that?
I can read it.
Would you like to do that? Let's see if we can get through that. Yeah. And if not, they'll have to buy your book because it was a wonderful, wonderful story.
Okay. A Butterfly Kiss. High in the mountains along the Blue Ridge Parkway, a young boy ran through grassy fields as he flailed away at butterflies with a homemade butterfly net in his right hand. He had constructed the makeshift weapon from an old broom, a wire hanger, and a discarded hairnet. Occasionally he stopped to make adjustments or repair his creation. In his left hand he grasped an old canning jar with a metal lid. This jar would be a temporary prison for his unfortunate prey. The final destination for unique specimens would be the boy's photograph book of plastic pages suitable for displaying these beautiful creatures. He suddenly stopped, groped into the net, and delicately extracted a butterfly. He unscrewed the top of the jar and with one swift motion placed the wiggling specimen inside the jar and screwed the top in place.
I have to stop you a minute because that made me feel really bad for that butterfly.
It's not good for the butterfly.
I know,
sure.
I know. Go ahead.
Now, from the other side of the hill, a little girl approached, running alongside a beagle puppy. Neither boy nor girl seemed to notice each other at first. Between them lay an old cemetery with 100 or so old tombstones, some standing and others laying down and broken. The sign over the gate read Blue Mountain Methodist Church Cemetery. The little girl, not having complete control over her puppy, watched as he entered the cemetery at full speed. She followed. The little boy, not having any control over the butterfly community, ran through the cemetery gate also. The little girl, startled by the swishing of the butterfly net, stopped and turned to see what was happening. The boy, looking up at his prospective specimens, didn't see her until they collided and tumbled into one of the newer-looking tombstones inscribed, Tiny Sarah Adams, gone too soon, 1896 to 1901, so she lived 5 years. The boy and girl searched themselves for injuries, both finding nothing more than a little scratch or two, laughed at their predicament. The puppy saw nothing and kept running in circles around the cemetery fence. The girl introduced herself. Hi, I'm Audrey Adams, and that's my dog, Buster. The boy replied, I'm Art Stanton, and this is a new addition to my butterfly collection. Look, said Audrey, the tombstone is for a girl with my last name. I remember my grandfather telling me his twin sister died from a wagon accident when they were only 5 years old. I have never seen the grave before. Wow, said the boy. What a coincidence. My grandmother told me about a wagon accident she was in when she was very young. One of her friends never recovered from his injuries. It was very traumatic for all of the children out for a wagon ride during a church outing. When the wagon wheel broke, the wagon tipped to one side, suddenly jerking back on the horse, which bucked violently, trampled some of the injured children. My grandmother will not even go near a horse today. The girl replied, my grandfather remembers the panicky horse, crying children, and something else. She looked at the butterfly in the jar and continued, when my grandfather tried to wake his sister, she did not respond. Resting on his motionless sister's forehead was a beautiful butterfly. The butterfly began flying toward him, hovering just in front of his face. Then the butterfly flew up high into the sky and disappeared above him. After hearing this, the little boy unscrewed the top of his jar and let the captured butterfly go free. The butterfly flew to the little girl, hovered for a second or two, and then began flying among the tombstones. The little girl smiled and gave the little boy a kiss on the cheek as the puppy began to chase the now free butterfly. The boy and girl walked back into town with the puppy chasing butterflies, but catching none. It was a game where everyone survives and all profit from the experience. I visited the area 20 years later and learned that Art Stanton and Audrey Adams became longtime friends who married and had 2 children. They have many beagles, no horses, and butterfly bushes everywhere. That's the end.
You know, I have to tell you.
It makes me emotional when I read it.
Yeah, it's very emotional. I mean, your wife was sitting here and I were just, really kind of shaking here. It is very beautiful, and I love to have an author read something because there's nobody that can do it as well because it's from your heart. Now, not everyone is as articulate as you, so I'm a little careful when I ask authors to read because some of them do very well, but then some others don't have the same, command that you did. But
it's been a while since I read that one.
Thank you.
I like it.
Oh, I like it, but it had a lot of sentimentality. It was really quite lovely. So if you're interested in those kinds of stories, they're very sweet. Some are a little stronger than that, but it's called Short Stories by R.A. Albert, and you can get that on Kindle, but you can also get it, of course, by Amazon.com. And I really suggest that you do this. It's a fun thing, and also I think that gifts of books are lovely. That's something that you can order, give it to someone. A lot of times you go through the stores and you buy things that have no value, but buy someone a book. That's why we do a lot of book reviews. We really think that it's something that will last for a long time.
Okay, I agree.
So we're happy that you're now going to maybe continue with one story or do some more short stories. And we thank you very much for coming all the way down here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Right, and remember, everyone, when you come to the Boomer Expo Friday, the 22nd, we will have these books. We have a book fair there, and we have a lot of books, but then we have our special books, which are either Book of the Month or Publisher's Choice, and you'll be able to see the book when you come down there. So, and I don't know if you're coming, but we hope that you'll just
plan on
down.
We plan on being there.
We hope you do come down. It's a really a wonderful event, and we really cherish our authors and our books. So, thanks a lot, Bob, Robert.
Thank you.
We appreciate everything.